Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to talk about the incredible story of the Berlin Wall, the ultimate symbol of the Cold War. But we're not just talking about its fall. We're talking about how it all came crashing down in a single chaotic night. And trust me, the story of how it happened is even more wild than you might think.
So you gotta ask the big question, right? How does a global superpower just lose its entire empire in less than a year? Because the fall of the Berlin Wall wasn't just about one city or one wall. It was the explosive climax of a stunningly fast collapse of power.
All right, to really get what happened, you have to rewind a bit. Back in the early 1980s, the Soviet Union's control over Eastern Europe looked absolutely solid. I mean, it was an iron grip, backed by a very clear, very brutal history of using military force to crush anyone who stepped out of line.
And that control had a name, the Brezhnev Doctrine. The rule of the game was simple and undisputed. If you tried to break away, you got a visit from Soviet tanks. We all saw it happen in Hungary back in '56 and again in Czechoslovakia in '68. That threat was the glue, the only thing really holding the Eastern Bloc together.
But here's the thing. While it looked like an iron fist on the outside, the whole system was rotting from the inside. The economies of the Eastern Bloc were just stagnating. They were weighed down by massive military spending, and they just couldn't innovate. They couldn't keep up with the West, which was booming. This economic weakness meant that some kind of radical reform wasn't just an option anymore. It was an absolute necessity.
And that's when this guy, Mikhail Gorbachev, steps onto the scene in 1985. Now you've got to understand, his goal wasn't to tear the Soviet Union apart. It was the exact opposite. He wanted to modernize communism, to give it a human face, really, to save it from itself. This was his great gamble.
So he comes in with this two-part plan. First, you've got perestroika, which was all about restructuring the economy, maybe adding a few market elements to get things moving. And second, there was glasnost, or openness, allowing for more free speech, more criticism of the government. But, and this is a huge but, these reforms had a massive unintended consequence. Glasnost made people hungry for real freedom, while perestroika just couldn't fix the economy fast enough.
So you've got this pressure cooker building up, right? The economy is failing, and people are starting to speak out. And that brings us to the moment where the entire game just flips. In 1988, Gorbachev makes a move that completely upends 40 years of Soviet policy.
And you will not believe the name it got. The Sinatra Doctrine. Seriously, a Soviet official was joking around with reporters and said that, from now on, the countries of Eastern Europe were free to follow the old Frank Sinatra song and do things my way.
And what that meant was, for the first time since the end of World War II, the Soviet Union was openly saying it would not use military force to keep its satellite states in line. The threat of tanks was officially off the table. This wasn't just a small change. This was a complete game changer.
And you better believe people across Eastern Europe were listening. For them, this wasn't just some policy change in Moscow. This was a green light. The fear that had paralyzed them for decades was suddenly gone. And that's when the dominoes really started to fall, one after the other. I mean, just look how fast things moved. First, in June of '89, boom, Poland's solidarity movement wins big in elections, showing everyone it's possible to stand up to the communists and win. Then, over the summer, Hungary does something incredible. They literally snip a hole in the Iron Curtain, tearing down the barbed wire on their border with Austria. Suddenly, there's an escape route. By the fall, the streets of East German cities are flooded with hundreds of thousands of protesters, demanding change. So imagine you're the East German government right now. The pressure is just unbearable. Your own people are in the streets, and your big brother in Moscow has made it crystal clear. You're on your own. No help is coming. And the final trigger, the thing that actually brought the wall down, it wasn't some grand strategic plan. It wasn't a battle. It was a blunder, a confused, chaotic, and completely history-altering mistake by one single, poorly briefed official at a live press conference. This official, Gunter Schabowski, he's up there totally flustered. A reporter asks him when the new relaxed travel laws will take effect. He kind of shuffles his notes and basically stammers out that, as far as he knows, they're effective sofort, unverzüglich, immediately, without delay. The words just hung in the air, and then, bang, the news was everywhere.
So what do you do when you hear that after 28 years of being walled in? You go and see for yourself. And that's exactly what happened. Within hours, thousands upon thousands of East Berliners were surging toward the border crossings, toward the wall itself, testing the news, not sure if it was real, but daring to hope it was.
And the border guards? They were just as stunned as everyone else. They had no orders. They were making frantic calls to their bosses, but nobody knew what to tell them. So you have these massive, peaceful crowds chanting, "Open the gate." What are you going to do? They made the only decision they could. They opened the gates.
And that was it. November 9th, 1989. The Berlin Wall, that giant concrete scar that had divided a city, a country, and the world, was breached. People were climbing on top of it, dancing, taking hammers to it. It was just this unbelievable flood of pure joy.
And the consequences of that one night, they were immense, and they were immediate. It wasn't just a wall that fell. A whole world's order that had seemed permanent was transformed almost overnight.
I mean, just look at this. The division of Europe? Over. German reunification? It's starting. The entire Eastern Bloc just collapses in its wake. And within 2 short years, the Soviet Union itself is gone. That chain reaction Gorbachev had started, well, he simply couldn't stop it.
So it leaves us with this incredible irony, doesn't it? The plan that was designed to save an empire is the very thing that led to its complete and total destruction. So what was it? Was it one of history's greatest failures? Or was this just the unintended, messy, and beautiful way that freedom finally won?